Hello. Welcome to another Joyful Gym with Audrey Joy. I learned to drive when I was 3. Well, sort of. I grew up on a 900-acre irrigated farm and ranch in southwestern South Dakota, Fall River County. And Fall River County is the most southern and western county in the state. It's bordered to the west by Wyoming, to the south by Nebraska. Dad ran about 150 head of cattle in what we call a cow-calf operation. Basically what that means is the cattle would be impregnated every year, and after the calves were born and reached a marketable age, usually close to 1 year, they were sold. Also, on this cattle ranch, we would bring the cattle in for the winter months. This was done for a couple of reasons. One, it was easier to feed them when they were closer to home. And secondly, they were going to calve in February. So it was a lot easier to have them nearby than out in a pasture, because it's pretty cold in February. So they had to be fed since they weren't out to pasture. And to accomplish this task, Dad would sometimes have to get help in the feeding process, especially when there was a lack of proper help. Cattlemen and farmers are resourceful problem solvers, and so Dad's solution was to put me behind the wheel of the truck. Well, let's explain this. Dad loaded the necessary hay bales for the evening feeding in the back of the pickup. He drove us to the cattle pasture, and then he put the truck in neutral. And he stood me behind the driver's seat, and he gave me clear instruction to listen to his voice. Because I knew my right and left, he would tell me, a little to the right, a little to the left, and I was to follow his direction. And never was that vehicle going faster than 1 to 2 miles an hour. Should anything have gone awry, which it never did, he could have covered the ground from the back of the pickup to the cab in no time, with no problem. And he would often use his pet name for me when he was giving me instruction. He liked to call me Audie, so he'd say, a little to the right, Audie. Now a little to the left. I felt so important and so valued, and I somehow understood that what I was doing was making his job easier. Looking back on it now, I am sure that I was his last choice. But he made me feel like I was the best hand he'd ever worked with. And he gave me that encouragement because he was my dad and he knew me. God knows us even better than our earthly fathers do. We get a glimpse of this in Psalm 139. In that verse, it tells us that God knows our thoughts before we think them. He knows our words before we say them. And my favorite part of this psalm is actually verse 16. Thine eyes have seen my unformed substance. God knew me before I was me. God knew you before you were you. And if you really want to have your mind explode, well, realize that God has the same knowledge for every human being that's ever walked this planet and will have for everyone who is not yet born. Now that's a really big God. He knows us better than we know ourselves. And you know what? He loves us anyway. If you found value in this gem, share it with a friend and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Joyful Gems with Audrey Joy, or you can follow me on my Facebook page, This Is For Me. If you're not already a Joyful Gem subscriber, you can change that. Just log into my website, thisisforme.com, or just email me, audreyjoy@thisisforme.com. Be joyful.